Hello, my name is Dale and these are my books. I have just got back from a really fantastic book discussion group. All of our discussions are just so interesting. And the book we discussed tonight was Maurice by E M Forster. What is this about? It was a novel and it was completed in 1914, although the author E M Forster didn't publish it during his lifetime. Forster died in 1970 and it was published after his death, and the reason for that is because it speaks about two men who fall in love, they have sex, and towards the end of the novel they live happily ever after. And that was a bit scandalous at the time, so it just wasn't published. By the way, there will be some spoilers in the next few minutes. So it's seen as a classic. A movie has been made about it, starring a very young Hugh Grant. There's a BBC radio dramatisation about the book, which can be found on YouTube. And also I had gone to quite a few study guides online, and the best I think is coursehero.com. I just found that their summary of the book and the discussion of the themes really helpful. It consists of three characters, essentially, three main characters. One is Maurice, of course. Maurice is a man in Edwardian England in the early 1900s. He goes to Cambridge University, and while he's at Cambridge, he meets somebody called Clive. And Maurice and Clive fall in love with one another, but it's a very odd love affair. They are really besotted with each other, but there's no sex. On Clive's part in particular, he thinks that any attraction between men should be purely intellectual, and he talks a lot about the Greeks and he talks about Plato's Symposium and so on, where Maurice would really quite like to get it on with him, but Clive is not interested in that. So the book is about their relationship together, but Clive goes off to Greece and he changes himself, and he comes back and he says that he's no longer same-sex attracted, and in fact now he's attracted to women, and in fact he does get married to a woman, and that's really helpful to his future career in politics. Maurice is a little bit devastated by this, and he tries to get better. He goes to see a psychologist, a hypnotist. The hypnotist tries to hypnotize him into being heterosexual. The hypnotist gives up. He gets a bit bored with it, and he diagnoses Maurice with congenital homosexuality and suggests that he just go to Greece. He goes to Italy or to France, where gay sex is legal, and perhaps he can live out his life there. The book then moves into another part where Maurice meets Scutter, and Scutter is a working class man, and very much a theme of this novel is the differences in socioeconomic classes in general, but between Maurice and Scutter in particular. In a particular scene, which is almost Romeo and Juliet, Maurice goes to a window. He's on a first floor bedroom. He opens the window and he cries out, "Come," C-O-M-E, in the middle of the night. Scutter is actually standing in the rain, looking up into Maurice's window. So Scutter thinks that this is an invitation for him to climb up a ladder and to go into Maurice's bedroom, and Scutter stays the night. There's a bit of toing and froing, and then towards the end of the book, Maurice decides to throw his job away and his life as a respectable gentleman, and proposes to Scutter that they both go off and live happily ever after. And Scutter is keen on this idea as well. So the couple of points that came up during the book discussion was, one that surprised me was that people really disliked Maurice. They thought Maurice was an awful person. I thought he was an okay person. I thought he was very conflicted. I thought he was a bit arrogant and brash sometimes, but Forster goes out of his way to portray Maurice as being very ordinary. He's not particularly brilliant, he's not particularly handsome, he's not particularly exciting. He's a very ordinary person who just happens to be gay. Clive, on the other hand, Clive is a bit of a social climber. He belongs to a different socio-economic class to Maurice. Maurice is sort of suburban. He needs to work, and he works as a stockbroker, where Clive doesn't need to work so much. He is that rich, and he's looking at a career in politics. And so you can see why having a relationship with Maurice is totally out of the question, and why being married is actually quite a good idea. Scutter is working class. He's bisexual. He boasts that he can get a woman anytime he wants. But at the end, he really does love Maurice. There are a few bits of the novel which I felt were quite improbable, but which the rest of the group thought were perfectly okay. You know, that was just a sign of the times. For example, there is one part of the novel where Clive gets married, and on his wedding night walks into his wife's bedrooms. It's a thing with the upper classes in England. Even married couples tend to have different bedrooms. So he walks into his wife's bedroom, and she is genuinely puzzled as to why he is there. What does he want? Well, of course, what he wants to do is to have sex. This is his wedding night. It's their wedding night. But she was simply so ignorant of sex that she didn't know that this was something that was going to happen. Fortunately for her, the author points out that although it was a bit of a surprise on the wedding night, she actually quite like having sex in the future. Another bit of the novel that I found a bit improbable was that there are a number of times when Scutter and Maurice are alone. And in fact earlier, where Maurice and Clive are alone, and they're holding each other, they're physically affectionate, but no sex takes place. For two men who are attracted to each other in their early 20s to cuddle and not have a bit of a play seems to me to be a little bit improbable. But certainly most of the book club felt, no, that was just a sign of the times. A final thing that I found really quite improbable was the scene where Alec goes up into Maurice's bedroom. So here we have Alec. He is a servant. He is very low down on the socio-economic ladder. He is a groundsman. Yet he has the audacity to climb up a ladder and to step into Maurice's bedroom, his social better, and suggest that they lay in bed together and have a cuddle and stay the night. I thought this was improbable. It was pointed out, however, that this was more of a dream sequence, and if it was portrayed more as a dream sequence, I could buy that. It's just a dream sequence, just a bit of fantasy, which may have some grounding in reality, but it's just romantic, it's just Romeo and Juliet stuff. But nevertheless, that's what happens. So it's a good book. I would recommend it. It's certainly a gay classic. And it's a very interesting insight into how things used to be very different. The final thing I'll say about the book itself is that towards the end, everyone around the room thought that it had a happy ending. And the way it finishes is that Maurice goes to Clive, his former love interest, and says to Clive, "I am in love with your gamekeeper." And Clive is confused by this and says, "Do you mean Mrs.?" and gives a woman's name. And this is when Maurice says, no, I mean Alec. I love Alec. And in fact, I have given myself to him in soul and in body. Alec then leaves, and it says towards the end that as Clive gets older, he never quite realises when exactly Maurice leaves, but he just leaves, never sees him again. This is referred to by many people as the happy ending, and this is what the author wanted to do. He wanted to have a story of Maurice and Alec getting together, going away, and living happily ever after. But of course, we don't know from the novel whether they live happily ever after. We don't even know if they get a place together. We just don't know. That's the end of the novel. It's somewhat fitting, therefore, that a few years ago a piece of fan fiction was written called Alec, and Alec is the sequel, the fan fiction, to this novel. And it actually sounds like quite fun, and it tells the story from Alec's point of view and the next few decades of their life together. So it's a good book. Have a read. Read Alec if you can find it also. And thanks very much for listening.